Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 41 for March 17th, 2017. Hey everybody, Jan Rubino here, joined with Zach Bowden for another exciting episode of the Windows Central Podcast, where we talk about all things Microsoft and what's happened in the last week. This week we'll be talking about builds, lots and lots of builds, as we're rapidly approaching Creators Update release for April. Microsoft is pushing out a lot of new releases, so we'll talk about some of those. We'll also talk about what date specifically we're expecting the Creators Update on, although that can shift. We'll talk about Microsoft Teams and what that means for their enterprise users, as well as Windows 7 app update, or it's not app blocks. But basically, Microsoft is blocking some updates of Windows 7 and Windows 8 for users with certain chipsets. We'll talk about what that means as well. And Zach's article, should the Surface Phone run full Windows 10? Always an exciting topic, as there are lots of varying opinions on this. But how are you doing, Zach?
I'm not too bad. How are you?
I'm very excited because it's Friday, and that also means my Fridays now have turned into Hamburger Fridays, where I go to Five Guys, which is just down the street. And it's just little moments in life that you just really appreciate. So
I've never had Five Guys in my life.
It's pretty delicious, so you get criticize America all you want, and we deserve a lot of it, but we do have amazing hamburgers here, and so pretty excited about that. It's a little treat at the end of the week, but overall, a very busy week. Been doing a lot of hardware reviews. We'll talk about that later as well, but let's get into those builds with Windows 10, specifically for PC. Pretty quiet week, though, for mobile, which I guess probably isn't too surprising, but tell us what's new in these Windows 10 updates.
So this is pretty normal at this point in development, but all of these new builds, we had 3 desktop builds this week. No new features, just fixes. That's, part of the course at this point in development. Microsoft are hammering down on last-minute bugs so they can sign off on the Creators Update and roll it out to the public on April 11th, is what we've been hearing. Now, I don't believe the air quotes RTM has been selected just yet, and insiders definitely don't have it yet. I heard that next week Microsoft will roll out a release candidate, in the sense that they will roll out the build assuming it will be RTM, and if there's any final bugs that they spot, then obviously they will fix and compile another build. If not, then they will just start releasing things called zero-day patches for these for the final build, which is just like a normal security patch that you'd find through Windows Update. It's not a whole new build. It's one of those updates that changes the revision within the build number. So, for example, 15.0.63 or 65.1 or .15 or whatever. That's when it switches from being a major build to a minor build, and more bugs get fixed that way. Then on April 11th, or whenever Microsoft decides to roll out the Creators Update, they will release those fixes as one big cumulative update, just like they do every Patch Tuesday, and it will roll out. It will roll out slowly, targeting select Redstone 1 devices first, like the Surface, I imagine, and maybe a few third-party OEMs that have been whitelisted to receive the update. Then by the end of April, early March, it should begin rolling out to a lot more devices, similar to how they did it with the anniversary update.
I think in the past, they've typically gone basically the newer the device. So yeah, obviously the Surface devices tend to get it first, as well as basically anything that's like super new and that's kind of been out for a little while. So, and then it goes through the older stuff, which, there's a lot of PCs out there that are like 5 years old, which they may be towards the end, but those guys can always jumpstart the process, right, by downloading either the ISO files usually when they get released and force the update that way.
Yeah, I mean, this is really exciting. If I've had a few people ask me on Twitter, is now a good time to jump in on the Insider program? Yes,
right.
It's basically the builds you're using currently. The builds that are available in the fast ring are RTM quality. There's only a few minor bugs or smallish bugs that are still in the way, and most of those bugs won't affect normal usage. They're very sort of specific things.
Yeah, I'm using it on my Surface Book, and I did have an issue, I think it was last week, with one of the builds with basically sleep and resume. And then they released a combo of looked like firmware updates for the Surface Pro 4 and Surface Book. And I'm pretty sure that is preparation for RS2, because I noticed right after that, along with the new build release, all of a sudden everything was working fine again. So, so Surface devices seem to be pretty stable at this point, although I am actually updating today's release. So fingers crossed, no issues there. But that's been sort of a problem in the past with some of the surfaces.
It's probably worth mentioning as well. Microsoft had a pretty huge Patch Tuesday this past week, where they released basically a double whammy of updates because they skipped February's Patch Tuesday. So with March, we received a whole ton of new updates and features for the current release of Windows 10, which is the anniversary update. And one of the changes that update introduced was in the Windows Update page on the anniversary update. Now you get a little teaser for the Creators Update. It says the Creators Update is coming. You can, get it early by clicking here, and then you see this link says show me how. Right now, the link actually doesn't let you reserve it or get it early because the Creators Update isn't done. I don't know if that link will. Microsoft's wording suggests it will do something at some point, but currently it just takes you to a help page where it says the Creators Update is on its way. You can join the Insider program now to get it early, which I don't think is a good idea for normal consumers. I don't know why Microsoft are promoting that.
Because it's feedback. They want feedback.
But yeah, a busy week for the update stuff and the sign-off process for Microsoft. I did hear today would be the last day for compiling non-RTM-esque builds, but I don't know if that's the case. I think they might have a few days next week as well. I don't know. They might even work over the weekend. So usually at this point in development, they do work over the weekend.
There's also usually a point at which you can't enroll in the Insider program anymore.
Really?
Yeah, they tend to right before the final release. It gets more difficult. Sometimes they cut off. I've also noticed this before where when they're about to ship a new build, even for the Insider program, your computer will be put on a wait list for I put my HP Spectre into the Insider program, and it wouldn't, even after 24 hours, it wasn't seeing an update. And then that night, a new update came out. And so what happens is it basically gets skipped for the current version because they know another one's been submitted and prepped for the Insider program. So it's kind of curious. But yeah, I mean, in the past, at least, it seems like right before the actual public announcement release of the milestone comes out, sometimes the Insider program, you can't enroll into it anymore. So we'll have to see if that happens again, though. There's been a lot of changes, obviously, with the Insider program for this year. So.
Yeah, I mean, the UWP stuff is also... not UWP, the UUP, the Unified Update Platform is also a big deal, although I don't think it's going to be rolling out...
Right.
It'll be for the next release.
The system comes out for this release, but you won't see the effect until the next release. Right.
Speaking of the next release, we should expect to see the first Redstone 3 builds for Insiders by the late April, I think. They're not going to be wasting any time with hanging around on the RTM. So if you are an Insider, you can obviously... you'll be able to install the RTM through the Insider Fastwing. Microsoft probably won't call it the final build or anything. They'll just roll it out as a normal build, similar to how they did with the anniversary update. Then after a few days, you may notice that if they start releasing patches for it, then they are likely going to release it as the final build. And then you'll usually find a few days after that, you can jump off the fast ring and hit release previewing. And what that will do is it will sort of sign you off on the Insider program. It'll keep you on the program, of course, but it will no longer look for new pre-release builds. It will only look for those patches for the upcoming current branch, if you will. And then the release preview ring should receive the update before the production ring does, which is kind of what it's for. It's the release preview. It's whatever is being released will be put through that ring eventually. So I hit fast, slow, release preview, then production.
Yeah, my recommendation would be to jump into release preview after RS2. Typically, I mean, I don't know, the last time it came out, it seemed like RS2 Insider builds were pretty stable early on, and there weren't many changes right away. And then it was like we went through this period, like almost towards the middle, past halfway towards a release, where things started to get kind of quirky, more bugs and weird sort of things. That's usually the case here, but yeah, we still got to figure out what's going to go on with RS3. I think it's funny that as soon as we get to, install this, we already talk about RS3. Now, we do expect, of course, Microsoft to share more about what's coming next in the fall, and we do expect that update to come in October. That's Redstone 3, which has no formal name yet, but more at Build will most likely hear about that. I imagine during the first day keynote, they'll be hopefully sharing even the name, although maybe not. I don't know. It's going to be kind of interesting to see how much they talk about this stuff. There's also been we should also mention, I guess we'll put this into the show notes now, that Surface Book rumor.
Yes.
So this came out at Digitimes, and we're kind of joking around about this yesterday. So Digitimes has a weird track record with accuracy. And usually they're not right, but sometimes they get like a little bit that's semi-true, but then they get facts wrong. So let's take a look at this rumor. Surface Book 2, they said, is entering mass production. I would actually rate that as probably accurate. There's been some signs that a Surface Book and a Surface Pro 5 are kind of nearing release. Ralph Grain, I believe his name is, the head designer for the Surface products and for Microsoft's hardware, tweeted out a cryptic, almost finished, I believe it was, tweet this week. No context given. And so we have to always remember, timing with these devices, it's never set to anything. So while there are definitely hardware considerations, like for instance, they probably want to go with Kaby Lake, and it's a good thing they waited a little while after Kaby Lake because they didn't want to get screwed with Skylake, which was what happened last time. They were the first ones out there, and that was a very rough start due to Intel and having, issues with the chips at first. So now that Kaby Lake's been out for a while, they've, can test things, but there's no, they've always said they release products when they're ready, and that's the idea here. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if that's happening. So mass production, probably true. The other thing was really curious, though. They said that they've basically abandoned this idea of the Surface Book where the display pops off. It's just going to be a laptop now, and it's going to be cheaper. And the cheaper thing also both of these rub me the wrong way. First of all, the cheaper thing, I don't get that. The Surface is never, if Microsoft always wanted to just sell like hundreds of thousands or millions of these things, they would have always lowered the price. Surfaces have always been expensive devices. Surface Studio, case in point. I mean, the thing starts at $3,000, goes over $4,000, and it's not, besides the display, the actual computer is not really, anything crazy. Although I would, in comparison to some other all-ones, I actually think the Surface Studio is still pretty performant. But the Surface has never been about a bargain. Like, yeah, they go on sale, but it's not the point of it. They're not trying to make this like an entry-level or budget device. And they do it for two reasons. One, it's supposed to be high-end hardware to actually show off everything that Windows 10 is capable of doing. That's what it is. Two, they don't want to tick off their OEM partners. If you're Lenovo, if you're Dell, you're HP, you're Acer, you're Asus, like the idea that Microsoft's going to make like already a popular product even cheaper to directly compete with you in your offerings. And that's always the thing with Surface. It's always been super expensive so that people want it, but they end up a lot of times going for, say, the Dell XPS or the HP, Elites or their Spectre series. So I find that curious that they would lower the price because sales weren't that great. I don't think they care about sales. This was more about just having that device out there. The other thing with the detachable screen, I think, is hilarious because now I'll concede Microsoft's capable of anything. They could totally release this and no screen pop off. Maybe that'll happen. I haven't heard that. I haven't heard anything to contradict that either. I think it would be a really weird walk back for them. If you remember 2 years ago almost, when they announced the Surface Book 2, they showed this awesome sizzler reel. We're all like blown away by this thing. It was beautiful. It was a laptop. They announced the price. And then they're like, Panos was on stage with that critical moment. He's like, wait, go back and watch that footage again. And they went back, and then the screen pops off, and the crowd goes nuts. The idea that they're going to walk that whole part back blows my mind. Like, hey, remember the whole thing? We said it was the ultimate laptop because the screen could pop off and you could use it as a tablet. We got rid of that because we were wrong. Because that's what they would be saying, in effect. We were wrong. This wasn't the actual ultimate laptop. And that was all nonsense. And even though you're all blown away by it, we just got that incorrect. So we're not going to do it. And the idea of a Surface device coming out that doesn't have pen support, even though Windows 10 is specifically the creators update, focuses a lot on pen and creation and 3D modeling, kills me. Like, I don't know. I just call nonsense on that part.
But what if they're planning two different models of the Surface Book 2? One model with the detachable, one without.
Why? What would be the point? Why muddy the water? They're not trying to get a Surface Book in every school child's hands. They're not trying to get the Surface Book into the masses. It's a aspirational device. You're supposed to want it. A lot of us can't afford it. but it's supposed to set the bar, so like why cut corners to what would be the goal? Like I've already said this, I use the Surface Book 98% time as just a straight laptop. Like I don't pop off the screen rarely. I can still do that, so why make it so you can't take the screen off?
Yeah, no, I agree completely. Although, again, like you, I don't ever use the Surface Book in tablet mode. I never have. I know Jez sometimes does. He likes to do some doodles and drawing every so often. So he is also in the camp that the new Surface Book should be a detachable or at least a two-in-one. But maybe the report got confused in the sense that there's a newly designed hinge that no longer is the sort of detachable, but rather more of a 360 hinge like on the Spectre X360 or something.
And that is totally plausible because the hinge, as creative as it was, the fulcrum hinge, some people didn't like the gap. And we reported last year that they've come up with a new design that gets rid of that gap, basically. Mm-hmm. And that may be where that is. But don't forget, even before the Surface Book came out, DigiTimes, and we had reports on it, Verge had reports on it, and everybody was reporting on basically a larger surface with like maybe a 14 or 15-inch display. It was going to be like 4K or something like that. And we all have these rough things, and that was all right. But literally every single publication, every rumor, every leak missed the part about the screen detaching. Like literally the key thing about the Surface Book, everybody missed it. And all the rumors, there was not a single one that had that or called it or said that was what's going to happen. And that's why I think, DigiTimes, they're pretty good at getting like bits of info, but they miss the key things. Even when they reported the all-in-one, they said, oh, Microsoft's working on an all-in-one. And then we got info on that too. But we all missed some of the key features of what made the Surface Studio, like the whole articulating screen and going down a 20-degree angle. Everybody missed all those things. And so that's why I got to say, be very careful with DigiTimes. They tend to miss the actual story for what is, like I said, Surface Book 2, we know it's coming. It's probably going to mass production. Sure, all that's probably accurate, but I don't know. I'd be very shocked if they walk back the whole, and if the screen doesn't attach, I think you're right. Like it's because it does something else, right? It rotates around. They figured out a new way to do it. Like if you look at the new Porsche Designs laptop, it does a whole thing where it comes off, but like, what is it? It also rotates around. So it's like it actually, I would say, improved upon the Surface Book's design, which is actually, exactly what the Surface Book's supposed to do. All the Surfaces are supposed to set a precedent out there, and then the OEMs go out and create stuff. And that's what we're seeing, right? We're seeing Dell, HP, Lenovo all creating really awesome hardware now. I said it years ago, these 2-in-1s were clunky. It was neat, but they always had like giant bezels on them. They were thicker. The battery life wasn't as good. But now you can get a 2-in-1. I said it with the HP Spectre. You can use that as a laptop 100% of the time and never flip it around. But if you want to flip it around, you can. And that's the way that hardware should be. It should be just as an option that it's seamless. You don't know it's there. So
I definitely think the reason I don't use the Surface Book as more of a tablet more often is because of the mechanism for turning it into a tablet. It's a little bit more clunky and slow compared to being able to just throw a screen around on a 360-degree hinge. So I found that I use the Spectre X360 a little more in tablet mode, not all that much more, but I will find myself flipping it over a little bit more often than the Surface Book because of that detachable weirdness that the Surface Book currently has. And don't get me wrong, I mean, at first a lot of people didn't like the hinge, but then they grew to love it. I'm a big fan of the Surface Book hinge and its weird design and stuff. But I also wouldn't care if the Surface Book 2 wasn't detachable and it wasn't a 2-in-1. It was just a normal laptop. I tweeted this earlier. I would be totally fine with it. I wouldn't care. I'd still buy it.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, and that's how we always saw the Surface Book, and that's how Microsoft sold it. The Surface Book is, you want a laptop majority of the time, but you want the flexibility of being able to use it as a tablet. Because don't forget, it gets less than 3 hours of battery life as a tablet, And that's what the compromise was. The Surface Pro is like, I want a tablet all the time that can also be a laptop. And that's how you gotta think of those two devices. So, but I'd be shocked, because if the screen doesn't do anything, you can't have it as a pen. It's the reason why the XPS 15 has no active pen support, because you can't use a pen on a display that doesn't flip back all the way or do something. It'll just bounce, right? Like that, you can't reach over the keyboard to draw on the screen. That's an Apple solution. That's because they're a touch bar. But so there has to be more to this. I guarantee you they did rework that hinge. They probably did something different, but this thing's got to have pen support. It's going to do something cool. I mean, come on. You got to say something about their Surface products. Basically, every single one of them comes out is better than the last. And I don't necessarily mean like the Surface Studio is better than the Surface Pro. I mean, in terms of the actual execution of it, they tend to get it right first now. Whereas the Surface series, I've said this before, it wasn't to Surface Pro 3 did they really find that perfect mixture of technology and design. And then they've been just kind of nailing it ever since. And I think it's a good thing they took this much time off. Now, don't forget, by the time they announce this in April, comes out around May, just putting it out there, we're looking at 18-month, gap between the last one and this one. That's actually a pretty good product cycle. Mm-hmm. We've talked about how having it every year would be really kind of, I get it, but it's kind of disastrous also for consumers, because it's like it comes out, well, I'll get it for the fall. Now you're already only 8 months left until the next one comes out. And then you always have the next thing. But when they take off 18 months, they can be, think about design a lot more carefully, because Surface Pro 4 was an iterative update. It doesn't change. It doesn't look radically different from Surface Pro 3. And so I think with Surface Book 2, they're going to keep the fundamentals there, but it's going to be improved in significant ways that they couldn't have done if they just did a yearly update.
I'd definitely like to see. I believe Microsoft has a patent for this, actually. A little while ago, there was news that Microsoft patented this new sort of technology where there'd be sort of no bezel or a very thin bezel, but then they could add a virtual bezel to the screen.
Yeah, that's a cool idea.
It would be a great idea, especially for the Surface Book and the Surface Pro, in the sense that when it's in sort of laptop mode for both cases, it would have basically almost no border, just like the XPS 13 or 15, for example. But then if you were to flip it into tablet mode or you detach the screen, Windows would be able to add sort of like a virtual border. It'd shrink the screen ever so slightly, turn off the touch digitizer where the screen is no longer being presented, and then you can hold it as a tablet. Great idea. And if Microsoft are planning to add an AMOLED screen, for example, to the Surface line, it would look great. It would look perfect, I'd say.
Yeah, I'm curious about the AMOLED thing. We haven't seen many AMOLED touchscreen pen devices. You get into some issues here with digitizers, and I'm curious about that. And also, there's things with AMOLED and pen tile and actual display resolutions that purists get sort of angry about. This is why the HP Spectre 15, a lot of people are happy with. It's a 4K display, but it's non-pen tile. People would argue pen tile displays do trickery with the way that the patterning of the pixels are, that it's not true 4K. So always going with that. If you notice what Surfaces have done with their typical screen technology, it's not been like that. Even IGZO, which is what Dell uses for the XPS line, has some weird quirks to it as far as visualness. It's super bright, super contrasty, but there's something about it, the way you look at it. It might be the pen tile aspect, I'm not really sure, but how they're going to choose the display technology that's best for drawing and visual acuity with no distortion. But yeah, I agree that virtual border thing, because people don't recognize that. It's same with the Surface Studio. Surface Studio has what some people, it's not a thick bezel by any means, but people were like, why couldn't it be thinner? But it's so you can grip it when you need to grab it by the sides to bring it down, that you're not touching the display. But yeah, if you can make that virtual, that opens up a whole new avenue. That'd be some interesting stuff if that's what they do.
I mean, Microsoft could do a lot with the new Surface Books. They could have, right now at least, with the current Surface Book, although there is a detachable detachable base with different specs. You can't buy the bases separately. I think it would be a great idea is with the next
still don't think they're going to do that.
No, neither do I. But it would be a great idea if they did start selling the bases separately, because then you could buy one device, the i5 or the i7, and then you wouldn't exactly kind of be stuck with it. You could, for example, go out and buy a more powerful base with the performance base. This would have been the perfect time to introduce that method where, we've got a new base out. It's really great. It's got all this new GPU in it, bigger battery. And we're selling it on its own for those of you who currently have a Surface Book.
This is always this is always a problem with modular PC technology, which is the modular part, the actual part that connects, needs to be standardized, and it's almost always proprietary, and that locks. And Microsoft has this problem sort of with the keyboard covers, which is like they have to keep that. They have to have that connector not change for generations. But sometimes new technology comes out. They could we can make that connector, thinner or smaller, or, it can deliver more power. Like there's little tweaks that connector. And if they can't change it because they said they've committed to it being a modular system, that's a big drawback if you're a designer. And this is always the issue with these sort of, we were talking about this the other day. I believe it was on the podcast yesterday for gaming, but the connector for the power connector for the Surface, right now it's that cool proprietary but magnetic one. And it's really nice. It's just, the fin, right? It just slips right in. If you trip on it, just like Apple had years ago, it just pops out. Really nice. Are they going to keep that for the next generation? The reason why not, USB Type-C is now taking over everything. People like the idea of, I just need a USB Type-C wall charger. I can use it for all my devices. USB Type-C can also deliver a higher power current. Why? It's not proprietary. It's a, Type-C can do a lot of power if it's a Thunderbolt. And so even Apple got rid of their mag, charger, which was kind of crazy. I was actually really surprised because that was a very Apple thing for them for a long time that people really appreciate. That if you tripped on it, it wouldn't throw your laptop. Now the question is, does Microsoft get rid of theirs? And there's good reasons to do it. It's standardized. You can just have one port that does everything. That saves a lot of space. If you look at the Surface, the size of that charging port, it's not tiny. And when you have to put that onto the board and all this, that is space they can use. They've always talked about the Surface, that it's packed so tightly in there that you couldn't even fit a business card between the components. So anytime they can save space on something, they're going to. So I'm really curious if that's what they do. How would you feel about that? They got rid of the proprietary connector.
I genuinely don't care. I mean, I would, if they were planning to change it, I'd rather them do it sooner rather than later, because then it just gets the change out the way and people can adapt to it. Because I do believe that USB-C is the future of USB as a whole. Really, it's definitely a much more convenient system than compared to the older USB tech and proprietary ones. I love being able to charge my phone and my Spectre laptop with the same charger. I love that. Yeah. It's just so convenient. I bring one charger with me now, and it's a USB-C charger, and it does both. It's really great.
And USB it could do that fast charge, right? With the chipset. Exactly. I mean, being able to charge a laptop 50% in 30 minutes, no joke. It almost sort of makes the how good is the battery life thing a little bit not as important, because you can always just charge quickly and get that extra boost. So Type-C allows for all that. I would be happy Surface Pro if it just has a Type-C and a Type-A port for it. I'd be super psyched. Surface Book, keep the SD card, of course, because they almost have to keep the SD card just because of all the flack that Apple got, right? If they got rid of it too, it would almost be but I know they would want to get rid of it. Everybody wants to get rid of it because it takes up so much space, it really does. But
I mean, I can see the disadvantage of leaving the current port on the Surface as well. For example, the docks, the Surface Pro 3 dock, which does work in the Surface Pro 4, they did promise that upgradability, I guess. But
the dock, they would have to. I mean,
you'd have to get rid of it. It's been around.
You need to go to a full Thunderbolt 3 dock, which gives you so much more options. And they need to have the 4 PCI lanes. This is the mistake Dell makes. With the XPS line, it only has 2 PCI lanes, which means you can power one external 4K display at 60 frames per second. That's awesome. A lot of people want to do 2, and you can't do that with the Dells. And Apple, for all the flack that they get for the new MacBooks, do have full PCI lane support on all their USB ports on that device, which I believe there's 4, which is, they went, I think, insane with that. But any one of those ports can connect up to displays, and they work fully, and that's kind of a cool thing. So this technology is super complicated, and there's always trade-offs for things.
Mm-hmm. So. What if the new Surface had both the proprietary and a USB-C?
Yeah, I mean, they could do that, but I think they would want to get rid of it. Like I said, the size of that charging port is huge. Mm-hmm. They could use that space for so many other things, and it's like I said, that's why Apple got rid of the headphone jack. I know that ticks off people, and to be honest, I hate it too, because sometimes I switch between my phones. I'll grab my iPhone and I'll go to the gym, and I can't use any of my headphones with it, and it's really frustrating. But I get the motivation. I mean, it is hilarious that the headphone jack is like almost 100 years old and we're still using it, But and they can save so much space on these things. So, there's definitely, these are the things that they have to contend with, and it's not trivial.
While we're on the subject of Surface, we might as well talk about my Surface Phone sort of opinion piece that I wrote earlier today. So I published an article today that was called, "Should the Surface Phone Run Full Windows 10?" Now, there have been rumors for a little while now, ever since Microsoft announced that they were bringing full Windows 10 to ARM, that Microsoft's new next phone, whether it be a Surface phone or a Surface, whatever, should run full Windows 10. I don't think that's a good idea. This is my personal opinion, of course, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Dan, but I think it should run Windows 10 Mobile, which many people hear that and go, "Are you crazy? Have you seen the state of Windows 10 Mobile?" I have. I'm not expecting Microsoft to release a Surface Phone this year with Windows 10 Mobile. That would be, I think, a silly idea. But in the future, I think it might be a viable option, because, for one, the main reason why most people want full Windows 10 on a phone is because then you'd be able to leverage Win32 when in Continuum and stuff. I mean, really? Who is outside of Enterprise? I understand. Who's looking at their phone and going, "Man, I wish I could run Photoshop on that." I'm not seeing anybody do that. If you are somebody who uses Photoshop, you're never going to buy a phone to replace all of your devices to begin with. You are going to still have a dedicated laptop or a desktop to do Photoshop work or video editing with Premiere Pro. I mean, it would be nice for the phone to be able to run it, but there's no guaranteeing it would run well. For starters, it would be an emulated program because it's using an ARM processor with Microsoft's own sort of emulation tech to run the app on the ARM processor to begin with. So there's no guaranteeing it will run well. It might even run quite badly. I mean, the demos that we saw from Microsoft when they did showcase programs running on the Windows 10 ARM build, it was a demo. It was designed to showcase the best of, not the worst of. So we don't know, we don't have any sort of benchmark or idea of how these apps are going to run, especially heavy apps. Secondly, full Windows 10 is heavy, far heavier than Windows 10 Mobile, in the sense that it's bigger on a disk. It's far bigger to store on your phone's storage. On a 64 gig phone, it would take up at least, I think, 10 or maybe more gigs. A full Windows 10 install does, and it's just not a great. It wouldn't be a good idea. It's still got like the old Win32 API, so when you're in phone mode, you still got that heavy Win32ness in the background, even though you can't actually launch Win32 currently in phone mode. I assume that would be the case if they did bring full Windows 10 to ARM. And you're also not missing out on any of the experiences you would expect from a Windows device, because with C Shell, the idea is that it's the same experience across mobile, tablet, PC, whatever. So even if it's not full Windows 10, when you hook up to a Continuum dock or it folds out into a tablet or whatever the Surface Phone will be able to do, you will still get that same desktop experience, just without the heaviness of a full Windows operating system and without the ability to run Win32, of course. And enterprise phones like HP and stuff, they've already got their workarounds, such as the Workspace app, which HP currently has with the Elite X3. And if enterprises really did need Win32, they could go through that. But I don't think it would be worth sacrificing the performance, the lightweightness, and just sort of the lightweightness, of the mobile SKU compared to the desktop SKU on a phone. What do you think?
No. It's a complicated question because there's a lot of what ifs sort of that would affect, the viability of this. So, for instance, could this, replace, like, this is always going to be the issue with the Continuum thing, which is like, if I have a Dell XPS 15 quad core GTX 1050, there's no phone on the planet that can approach that power, right? And so now we're okay, but let's back down to like a Surface device, which is a dual core. And, now I would say ARM is starting to sort of catch up a little bit to those, at least a lower end stuff. It also depends on its execution. Like, I've always had this sort of like, I might have mentioned this on podcasts before about this concept of like a Surface Book where instead of the trackpad's like the phone, like the phone pops out or something like that. I think that would be clunky. But at the same time, like, there's like some interesting things you can do if the phone powers, say, the tablet you're using. And that's what the Elite X3 kind of does, right, with the lap dock. And so this idea of like the phone powering your device, like if there's this Surface phone in the future is like this mobile device, but then also connects up and powers your Surface, and you throw into things like eGPUs now, which are becoming a little bit more popular. Like this concept of having modular computers, I think is really interesting. Like, if you saw on our Instagram today, I posted that we got the 1080 Ti in, which is like a ridiculous video card, right? And it's huge. By the way, that thing weighs 2.3 pounds, which I forgot what it is in kilograms. Sorry, but it's a lot. It's heavy. But like, if you think about this idea of like, I could connect that up to like, say, any laptop through the eGPU. And now, even like a Razer Blade Stealth, which is a 12.5-inch Ultrabook, it's super thin, super light, only dual core, where you can run a 1080 Ti with it. That concept of modular computing, I think, and divvying up stuff. So your points about the phone not being strong enough to run Win32 apps when docked or something like that, I think is true. But then if you throw in, what happens if this dock has extra memory, has more RAM in it, and it has an eGPU in there, and has these other things that now boost its power. So when you go to run those Win32 things, all of a sudden now it is a more significant performer. Like, that changes things, right? So now it's like, okay, well, that now becomes more interesting. If my phone, when I came home, I connected up to a dock that had like a 1060 GPU in there and more RAM, and it had an external hard drive, like, that now is kind of like a more powerful computer, and this becomes like less of an issue, right? So, but we don't know where this technology is. Is that possible? Is that something Microsoft's working on or even considering? We actually don't know. But I think that's where this industry is going, and that's how these problems will be solved, is this idea of, because you obviously don't need a dual core i7 on your phone while you're traveling, to make phone calls. You'd want a lighter processor. And if you look at mobile processors themselves, like how ARM does it with the big small chips, right? So they have the main cores, and then they have these smaller cores that handle these background tasks, and they're starting to divide up how the work goes. If you take that metaphor towards the desktop, I don't know, there's a lot more opportunity there.
My counter argument to this is, by the time this tech is ready, or by the time Microsoft are ready to release a new phone, whenever that may be, will we even like rely on Win32 at that point? Because I'm assuming that if Microsoft are going to do this whole phone thing, it will be it's a while away. It's not soon, I don't think, anyway. And by the time a Surface phone is ready or does come out, I'm not entirely convinced that the need for Win32 will be as strong as it is today.
This is, again, also, we don't know how they're going to position it. Like, is this thing positioned for prosumers, business users, enterprise, and that group, in which case that's a much easier sell? Or would this be like for consumers? I would argue it's going to be the former. I don't think even the Surface phone, I think it's going to be, even like the Surface Studio is a great example. The Surface Studio is a PC most people do not need. I don't need it. I like using it because the display is phenomenal. But like, technically, my work, I don't need this kind of device. I need something actually different. But that's, this. If you look at how all technology works, go back to the BlackBerry. I remember seeing, 2004, 2005, people with BlackBerries. I didn't need a BlackBerry, but I wanted a BlackBerry. I thought it was really kind of cool, this communicator device, back when it was just basically a pager with a keyboard, and then they came out with the phone version. Same thing with Trios. When I first got a Trio, it was actually because someone lost it, and I found it, and I couldn't get it back to them. And I was like, huh, I remember seeing that keyboard thinking that is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. How could that possibly be efficient? And of course I started typing, I'm like, this is actually really cool. This display is really nice. You know, and that's aspirational technology. So just because you don't need it or you don't think you need it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. I always use that example. When I had a Trio and there's GPS coming out, all my friends were like, why do you need that? Like, why do you need to message people? Why do you need email? Why don't you just wait till you get home? And now it's like, it's ludicrous, right? Everybody laughs because in 2017, everybody has a smartphone. Smartphones now they plateaued, they're peaked. So now the question is what comes next? And just because the argument, we don't need that, is not an actual argument. Is do you need it, but you just don't know it yet? And that's how all technology works. And that's a tough thing to solve. So I don't know.
I think if, say for this is an example, obviously, imagine if today all of a sudden Win32 was no longer required for anything. All of a sudden Microsoft releases this one app that says, hey, you press this one button, your Win32 program automatically does magic, and it can now be a UWP app. It runs on whatever it needs to run on.
Sure. That would be ideal.
If that happens, if that happens, then the Windows 10 Mobile on the Surface Phone all of a sudden becomes a great, almost the perfect option, because it's already incredibly lightweight. It will run incredibly well on the Snapdragon 835 or whatever it is the Surface Phone runs. And then you also get the sort of lightweight desktop experience thanks to C#.
Right. And then, I think... Go ahead. I was going to say, I think that's what they want, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I do agree. Coming out with a Surface Phone and going, it runs your apps from 10 years ago,
right,
is not a future and forward-looking device. That's a device that is like, it's a kludge, right? It solves a problem, but it's not like HoloLens. HoloLens isn't like, HoloLens is very future-looking, right? And we talked about this before, how it's going to be years before holographic computing is a thing, but we know it's coming. And so I agree. I mean, it would be a weird message to be like, here's a phone that can run apps from,
I mean, it's clear that Win32 isn't the future of mobile. It's the past for desktops. Even now, everyone says that desktops are dying. Whether that's true or not is another story. But Microsoft, this UWP platform is the future of basically all of Windows and its holographic sort of platform and everything Microsoft is sort of doing right now in software. It all relies on this universal Windows platform. And now this magic app that I said that would be able to transfer Win32 to UWP will obviously never exist. That's not possible. But over time, developers will, I believe, will slowly adopt the platform. Remember, it took several years, decades even, for Win32 to get where it is today. You can't just expect Microsoft to release a brand new platform and say, hey, we want apps by tomorrow for everyone. Right. It's going to take years. And we're 3 years into UWP now, maybe a bit more. I wouldn't start, wondering what's going on for at least a few more years at least. Because it does take a while.
Like 2 years, but yeah. No, it's the APIs and everything. That's what's being developed. That's what Build is all about, is bringing those tools and refinements. And, we'll talk about later C-Shell, the idea of like with XAML and everything. So I mean, that's the point of this, but yeah.
But yeah, long story short, I don't think the Surface Phone should run full Windows 10.
No, I agree. I mean, it doesn't... I get the idea for it, but yeah, it's not a future-looking device. But that also, so the problem is, it's like, how do you, if you don't have all the apps and the Snapchats and all that, how do you make a device that's mobile but also compelling enough that it could shake up the industry? Now, a lot of people say that's impossible. I disagree wholeheartedly. Like I said, years ago, people did not see the need for a smartphone, and they laughed at the idea of having email messaging because a lot of the stuff around it, the ecosystem, was not there yet. Like the idea of like a Google Maps, like a navigator on your phone, was not something people thought of, or, presence, the idea of when you walk home, your home detects your presence and turns the lights on. That wasn't a concept that existed in 2007, right? So as the smartphone evolved and picked up these extra abilities to make our lives, easier, or being able to control a thermostat from your phone, right? When, I love in the wintertime when I'm driving home, I'm like, my house is kind of cold. I'm going to turn the heat on. So when I walk through that door, it's hot. Like that concept didn't exist back then. So the idea of you creating a device that does things just, you haven't thought of yet is the trick here. And I think Microsoft could do it. They've done it so far with almost all the Surface devices. That doesn't mean it's not easy, but I think that, I think whatever Surface Phone will be, it'll be revolved around a pen. If you look at inking and holographic and, the creation stuff that they're doing, there's a lot of things they can do there that I think these opportunities. But we'll have to wait and see. I still like the Westworld concept of a phone that flips open to be like a full Surface tablet. I mean, if you think about that, that's kind of what that thing in Westworld, like for me, that is like the Surface phone. Like that is the concept they need. Something that can be a full-on computer. You can type on the keyboard on the screen as a full tablet, and then it folds up to a phone device. And that would be a cool thing. But I don't know.
I see a lot of people saying as well that Microsoft needs to release a phone sooner rather than later, because otherwise them building a foundation currently, it just doesn't work, because then nobody is going to want to buy in the future. I disagree entirely. Microsoft are at rock bottom. There's no way... It doesn't get any worse than this. It's almost as if Microsoft have never released a phone before, and they can come out whenever they want. It doesn't have to be tomorrow. It doesn't have to be this year or next year. They can wait 5 years if they really wanted to. Them not releasing a phone now isn't going to change whether the phone is successful in the future. Microsoft needs to build its foundation out. Needs to, continue evolving UWP and make developers see what they are, the power of the UWP stuff, and obviously how it scales and stuff. And then devices, hardware makers like HP with the Elite X3, and they're working on a new Elite X3, as we already know. If they release the Elite X3, the new Elite X3 with Seashell with Windows 10 Mobile, I think a lot more people will understand where I'm coming from when I say this Surface phone should run Windows 10 Mobile, because we believe the new Elite X3 will still run Windows 10 Mobile, but with Seashell, and that will basically bring desktop experience to the phone, but without the clunkiness of Win32 and the full desktopness. And then maybe, hopefully, Microsoft will take this device and say, right, this is the kind of thing that we're expecting devices to be like in the future. Build your apps for it. Then over the next few years, it wouldn't happen overnight again, of course, but over the next few years, developers will slowly jump on board. And then when Microsoft are ready to release their Surface phone, it gets released to the world with an actual healthy Windows Store with new features.
It also shouldn't be a phone. I think we should stop calling it Surface phone.
I did also mention that in the article. I do say Microsoft needs to step away from the phone sort of reputation that Windows 10 Mobile has. They need to rename it with what Seashell Rise and whatever in the future.
It's not a phone. It can't be a phone.
No.
We've talked about this like endlessly. And if there was an article out recently about this, the Surface team and the hardware team at Microsoft is about category creation. You can't create a category and call it a phone and be like, this is a new category. If it looks like a phone and just makes calls and has a screen on it, that's not a category creating device. And I think that's the challenge that they're facing with this. So you can't just, it's not going to be a freaking phone. No. Like it's going to be more than that. It has to be. That's why I call it like Surface Pocket,
I agree.
If they call it Surface Phone, it's just a phone, which is what people want them to do. Just like put out a phone that's metal. There's no way they can win with that, and everybody knows it. And so, and that's not, it breaks the concept of what Surface is, which is every time they've created a Surface device, it's been something that's never been done before, and a variation. So
Microsoft needs to sort of trick the market into thinking it's something new entirely. Where, like I say, it should be
Apple
called...
did it. Yeah. Apple did it with the iPhone. The first iPhone, people keep forgetting. We already had Windows Mobile at the time. We had BlackBerry. We had Trio. We all installed apps on them. They all did crazy things. You can hack Windows Mobile. It was like a little PC. And Apple came out with a device that had no apps. Not even an SD. And I don't mean no apps because developers didn't make them yet. I mean no apps because there's no SDK. The system was incapable of running apps because their future, according to them, was the web. It was all going to be done through the browser. And so, and the device was incapable of doing even the most basic things like cutting and pasting things. It didn't matter because the device itself, the hardware, the screen, the way it broke the mold where it said, we're not going to have a physical keyboard in this thing. We're just going to have a giant screen with a single button was enough to break into the market and and that changed the concept of what a smartphone was. I wouldn't even say it was it was a smartphone at the time. It was a feature phone because it couldn't run apps. They changed that later, of course, but that was only after they refined things. But it's the same thing with whatever this Surface mobile device. If they decide to do it, and I think they will, it has to do the same thing. It's gotta be enough of it has to bring something new to the market that no one's done yet before and do it better. So, all right. Enough of that. It's going to turn to the Surface mobile podcast.
Let's move on. Microsoft Teams launched this week. Yay. I mean, we tried out Microsoft Teams when it first entered preview. We tried to get the Windows Central team to use it, but the entire company, the Mobile Nations and stuff, we're all on Slack. So it was a little bit difficult because obviously iMore and Android Central wouldn't jump to Microsoft Teams because they don't need to. It would be just the Windows Central stuff, and then communicating across sites would be a little bit more difficult. But we did try it. We liked what we saw. At first, it was very bare bones.
I was going to say this is an organizational challenge with... We're at the bottom part. We run our own site, but we have a larger company, so we would need the top admin people to get on board with this, and that's always a challenge.
Right. Yeah. But we enjoyed our time with Microsoft Teams. We're not using it as our primary communication platform. I do hear that the general availability of Teams, they did release quite a hefty update, which added quite a few things to it, which is nice. But we really enjoyed our time using it when it was in early preview. It's available now if you have an Office 365 business subscription or one of the higher up subscriptions, I believe. Microsoft Teams is available to you now. You just add it to your portal as a IT admin or an Office admin, and it should just work, and you can set up your company to run with it. And it is a viable competitor to Slack, I will say. It's I would say they're on par, I think, now. A lot of people have said good things about Microsoft Teams and its general availability.
Yeah, no, Teams is really nice. It's a big challenge to Slack. Slack is very good for small markets and small indie groups and venture groups that have like very small teams. But Microsoft Teams is better for the big companies who are already. If you already have Office 365, you get Teams for free. And what it's going to do is it cuts off any upward mobility for Slack to get bigger companies on board. Because don't forget, Slack is still new. And not every company is on board with it. So they're always trying to woo customers, specifically the big companies who have a lot of infrastructure. And Microsoft's already there with Office 365. So they're coming from the other angle where Slack is like, for companies like us who are smaller, it's easier for us to adopt Slack. And that's where Slack will live. But now their ability to go up to the bigger companies has been really, I would say, kind of cut off. We'll have to see what happens with this, of course, down the road. But Teams came out the gate with some features that Slack didn't have that's since been addressed. But Microsoft has a lot of power here to make Teams more influential. And if you cut off all that big money that they're going to get, and that Slack can't get now, that's pretty significant. But yeah, so that's the Teams story.
As you can tell, we're incredibly excited.
Yes.
We're not really into Office
let's
stuff.
real briefly talk about Windows 7 8.1. So on the new chipsets for AMD's Ryzen and Kaby Lake processors, so that's Intel's 7th generation, the latest. This has always been a thing that's been looming, but it's finally taken effect, which is Microsoft is cutting off support for older versions of Windows on new hardware. And if you think about that, it makes a lot of sense. If you're buying a Kaby Lake PC, you're getting Windows 10 with it. But some people still want to downgrade and put Windows 7 on it. And you can do that, and it'll probably work, but Microsoft is finally cutting off support for those devices, and it's just a logistical thing. And this is always the challenge Microsoft has with building an operating system, which is like they need to build an OS that works across generations of hardware. And they have to, whether it's a printer, whether it's any kind of peripheral, and if you think about it, it's way better today than it was, 5 years ago. We're plugging in a device, nothing happened, right? I remember plugging in, you'd get new hardware, you had to put it in, and you had to load a CD up just to get the drivers. Otherwise, that device was completely useless. Now, you can plug in almost any device into a Windows 10 PC, and even if it's not the latest driver, you'll get some sort of generic official driver that'll come through, that'll enable it and allow it to work. And now it costs them a lot of money to go out and test all these things and make sure it works. And they're just finally saying, hey, listen, we're drawing a line here. We're not going to support cutting edge hardware with an operating system from years ago, and get on board with Windows 10. What can I say? That's business. It's a financial decision,
I like it when these kind of stories come out where Microsoft are blocking apps for certain devices, because everybody freaks out, especially since I think still half of the market are running Windows 7.
Right.
It's like you're running an operating system that's almost 10 years old. I think it's 8 years old now. It's old, okay? It's for software, that's a very old piece of software. And you can really see, I've said this before, if you use Windows 10 daily, then go back to Windows 7. There's a lot of things in Windows 7 that you're just so used to now in Windows 10 that Windows 7 doesn't have. And the hardware support is one of them. Like I don't see like the Kaby Lake CPUs. I don't see them and go, that Windows 7 can't run on that. But then you think about it and go, well, it has been quite a while. It does make sense for Microsoft to sort of be trying to stop people from adopting Windows 7, because there are people out there who still will buy a new PC, whether it be whatever, and then take advantage. I think they have downgrade rights still, where you can downgrade to an older version of Windows if you wish. And a lot of people do this, especially professionals.
HP offers it as an official thing for some of their enterprise devices.
Right, yeah. And Microsoft needs to kind of stop that. They need to sort of be like, right, we got to draw the line somewhere. We don't want another Windows XP scenario where nobody will get off it because it's just everywhere.
And I get some people are like, how dare they? But like I said, it's a fight. When you're not footing the bill, it's easy to be like, they should do this and just absolutely support stuff from years ago with new hardware. But like at the same time, they gotta direct money. And like, what's the more likely scenario? Someone is running an old tower from 10 years ago. They're going to replace the motherboard and the CPU, because you can't just stick Kaby Lake into a motherboard from years ago. And they're going to want to run Windows 7 on that. Like, is it really worth supporting that person? Or is it more likely that someone's going to actually go out and buy a new PC with Windows Hello and Windows 10 already pre-installed? Like, that's where, most of the money is being made, both for Microsoft, their partners, and, and there's good reasons. I mean, there's all sorts of security issues with the new hardware that's a lot better. So I don't know. It's like, I don't get it. Like, no other company is tasked with supporting as much hardware and legacy stuff as Microsoft is, and yet they still get like some crap because they don't want to support.
I think it's
OS from 2 systems ago.
I like how Apple just don't care. Once hardware is old enough, they go, "You're not getting updates no more." Tough. And people complain, but no, Apple doesn't lose any money. Yeah, there's some. It's funny, and then Microsoft tries it, and it was like, how dare you? You are the devil. But I just think Microsoft should do it. I think they should just say, right, you're running a software that's 8 years old. Apple would never support software for longer than 8 years, especially on like an iPhone or something. I don't even think their Macs get support for that long, do they?
And to be clear, I'm pretty sure that there are exceptions here for enterprise and everything. Sure. Where so this is just for the consumer stuff, really. Whereas their OEM partners and stuff like that, I think, have a lot more freedom and latitude to do things. So.
Microsoft should just have a new I don't give a damn attitude when it comes to people running old software. I just really think they should just stop caring and go, right, after 5 years, if you're still on a version of Windows that is 5 years old, just stop. We're no longer going to give you security updates. We don't care.
Well, they kind of are doing that. They are getting a little bit more stringent on those, cutoff dates and stuff like that. So, doesn't Windows Phone 8.1 end soon?
Yes.
So,
no one's using that anyway, so the outcry will be minuscule. I think Microsoft should just, when they were offering Windows 10 for free, I secretly wanted them to just push it as an update, just as a required update. That would have been great. The outrage would have been hilarious, but then you'd probably see after a little while, nobody cares.
Yeah. All right, we're wrapping up here for the podcast real quickly here. On Monday, I believe I should have my Dell XPS 27 review posted on the site. So if you're listening to this now, you can, get excited for that. So that is basically an XPS 15 blown up to a 27-inch. Now, I actually have the old XPS 27 from 2012, And I'm actually pretty excited because I was always curious why they haven't updated that device, but they basically gave it a ground up rebuild, and it has now 10 speakers in it, and it's a pretty awesome sound system. I immediately had audiophiles who, next to people who drive minivans, are on the top of my list for worst humans. I get if you're into audio, good for you. I appreciate that you appreciate music like no other human does. However, comparing, because I had people say, like, with the XPS 27, they're like, no way can those speakers sound that good. I'm like, that's the wrong question. The question is, does the XPS 27 sound better than any other all-in-one on the market today? And the answer is definitely, absolutely yes, because it's so loud that I could only turn up to 80% volume, and I was hitting almost 100 decibels, and I couldn't go any louder without it just being uncomfortable. So it's a very loud, crisp sounding system. It sounds fantastic. I'm sure your Polk or Onkyo system would beat it, but that's not the question I'm asking. It's also got a 4K display, which is really nice. It's touch, which I do not see a point on for a 27-inch PC that doesn't support pen, but nice to have. Looks really phenomenal, and it's all-in-ones are always trade-offs. There's no doubt about it. I will say though, if the Surface Studio with a 980M will beat it in terms of performance, which I thought was pretty funny. So maybe I was a little harsh on the Surface Studio, because I haven't seen an all-in-one that actually, at least the high-end one, I haven't seen any other all-in-one that outperforms it. So there are just limitations with having these kind of computers. But all-in-ones are so tempting because they're just convenient. Everything is just wrapped up in a PC, so I get it. But stay tuned for that review. I liked it a lot, in case you couldn't tell. There's not much wrong with it, assuming you're okay with an all-in-one to begin with. Although the camera, I don't want to say they screwed up the camera, but the same problem that exists with the XPS 13 and 15 happens with the 27, which is they went for really thin bezels, and so the camera is below the display. Now, it's a Windows Hello camera, so it's got 2 infrared things, and it works very well. But when you actually want to use it as a webcam, think about it. It's below the display. What do you think that looks like? It looks like the XPS 15. And so I think it's kind of funny that despite all the criticism they got in their laptop, they're like, you know what, screw it, we're doubling down. We're going to do it in the 27 too. Because they didn't do that in their last XPS 27 was on top, like a normal PC. But no, they're like, we're going to have the same Infinity Edge display, and we'll put the camera below. So I don't know. You have to decide if you want to live with that. I also did review the Precision 5520. If you haven't checked it out, please go ahead. It is the XPS 15, but with meant for enterprise. So it's got a Quadro graphics and Xeon processor, which is kind of cool. And then pretty soon I'll be reviewing the Samsung laptop, and we have a couple other things as well coming. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully I'll get an X1 Carbon in as well, because I'm very excited about trying that one out.
Awesome.
Anything from you?
No, I don't work here on Windows Central. No, next week I've got quite a few things. I'm going to be writing up my experience with the Creators Update on low-end mobile devices, because it looks like Microsoft have actually improved upon some performance stuff with mobile and on, say, the 550, for example. No, I'm not going back to the 920, that's just ridiculous. But on devices that are still supported, let's see how much Windows 10 Mobile has improved there. Then I'm going to write up my Redstone 3 wish list, since Redstone 2 is basically done and dusted at this point. I'm going to sort of list what I'm hoping to see Microsoft do with their next major release. Then I'm also going to try and sort of do a re-review of the Surface RT or Surface 2 in 2017, because they are stuck on an old version of Windows 8.1, sorry. And I want to see if they're still usable in 2017. The answer is no, but we will see for sure next week.
I should also mention, although probably not next week, because I'll be traveling a little bit next week, but I will be testing the 1080 Ti through the Razer Core eGPU and connecting it up to various devices, like a Dell XPS 15, the HP Spectre X360, which I know people are wondering what happens when you plug those. Do they work? Does it work well? And what can you actually do with it? It's an insane concept, but it should work. And I'll be starting to incorporate that into my reviews going forward. Basically, I'll connect up the eGPU, the Razer Core specifically, and put that into the review for the laptop, because I know more and more people are curious about that stuff. But there you go. Thanks for listening, guys. Remember, we record this on Fridays at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time live, and you can join in for the chat where we'll be answering questions next, but that won't be part of the recorded podcast. And we also record on Thursdays, the Microsoft Gaming and Libations with me, Zach, and Jez, where we get to play a video game. This week we did Andromeda Mass Effect, which I didn't care for too much, but it was fun for a while. We gave away a code key for that game as well. We may do that again next week as well, or a different game, but make sure you join in for that. We give away lots of games during that event, and it's just also fun and kind of chill. You can follow me on Twitter, Daniel_Rubino, Rubino, and you can follow Zach on Twitter at ZACBOWDEN. And there you go. Thanks for your participation, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Man, my desktop is a mess.
My office is a mess. All right, want to start recording?
Yes. I'm now recording.
Same here. 3, 2, 1.
That was really bad. Can we do that again?
3, 2, 1.